Has the coronavirus cracked the Great Firewall of China? People demand government action after the virus kills the doctor who first sounded the alarm. Can China's leaders contain the online anger about the cover-up? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Sami Zeidan. China censors the internet more than just about anywhere in the world. Anything critical of the government is usually immediately removed. But the censors are struggling to contain the outrage at the coronavirus outbreak. And there's widespread anger that the disease has killed one of the first doctors to sound the alarm over the new virus. Li Wenliang warned colleagues in December before he was arrested by police and forced to confess to spreading rumours. Users of China's social media network Weibo described his death as a national humiliation. Even state media is backing public calls for government leaders to say sorry for silencing him.
I deeply regret his death and feel sincerely sad for him. We need to see if the influence of his death can wake up anything, and I hope he did not die in vain.
The government should hear different opinions and allow them to exist. They should encourage criticism of anyone who has done wrong. Only then can we acknowledge problems in our work. We shouldn't only praise what we've done well. We really need to find out what we've done badly, what needs to be improved.
He showed a responsible attitude towards society. He is honest and faithful. So I think the whole society should reflect on this.
I'm angry because it is not only him, it may also be a situation that everyone will encounter in the future. I think there will be more and more whistleblowers in the future. He may be one of the few representatives at present, but now this is the kind of awareness is getting stronger and stronger. In the future, we will be more and more people like this on public events.
Following the announcement of the doctor's death, the head of China's foreign ministry in Hong Kong gave a rare news conference in English. He welcomed what he called lively discussions online.
The Chinese enjoy freedom of speech and access to information under the law. If you go to our online platforms, especially during the past few weeks, then you will see how freely the public are engaging and how actively they are engaging in lively discussions of the epidemics.
Well, let's bring our guests into the show. We have joining us from Hong Kong, Joseph Cheng, a political activist with the pro-democracy group Alliance for True Democracy. In Beijing, Einar Tangen is an advisor to China's government on economic and development issues, as well as being a China analyst. And from Bangkok in Thailand, Elliott Zaagman co-hosts the China Tech Investor podcast. Thank you all for joining us. Let me start with Einar in Beijing. So, is a clearer picture emerging of authorities simply mishandling the information that Dr. Li brought to light?
Well, let's just be careful here. This is an immense tragedy to a young man who devoted his life to medicine, but he was an ophthalmologist. He was an eye doctor. He's not an infectious disease specialist, and he was sharing some concerns he had in a private chat group. That went viral, and there was a series of events. He did this at the end of 2019. On January 1st, they went and closed the market. Now,
but surely, Einar, he shouldn't have been hauled up by police and told to stop rumour mongering, right? That wasn't the right way to deal, even if he was only an ophthalmologist.
He was questioned by the police. You can put any spin you want on it, but he was questioned by the police. He was, in fact, suspended. And that's because he was, in essence, spreading rumors. He's, as I said, not an infectious disease specialist. But in any event, by the 7th of January, there were people who understood the virus. There was a leading researcher, Chinese, who had been involved in SARS, and they understood completely that this was something new and that it was dangerous and they needed to contain it. And the bad part was when the local government decided that all they needed to do was clean out the market. Often, political leaders do not have subject matter knowledge, and this was the case here. They acted based on their political desire, which was to have an upcoming meeting with no bad news. And as a result, this something that could have been contained earlier was not.
All right, let's take that perspective to Joseph in Hong Kong. Political leaders didn't have subject knowledge. Did local authorities then fail here at all in realizing the seriousness of the situation?
Well, the Chinese Communist regime may be strong in mobilization, like getting the military medical personnel to Wuhan quickly, building a hospital, a new hospital in Wuhan in record time, the kind of thing. But transparency is definitely not the strong point. Let me cite two simple facts. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson told the international community that the Chinese government informed the White House about the epidemic as early as January the 3rd. But the Chinese authorities only informed the Chinese public about the epidemic crisis more than 2 weeks later, around about January the 19th or January the 20th. And when the mayor of Wuhan was questioned by journalists why he delayed the revelation of the epidemic crisis, he said that informing the public required the approval of the Chinese authorities, of his superiors. That spoke a lot. And certainly, the top leader, Xi Jinping, has told the nation that guiding the directions of public opinion is also a very important element in the campaign against the epidemic. Certainly, the Chinese authorities do not want to allow the public to see the undesirable aspects of the epidemic and the combat of the epidemic.
Let's bring Elliott into the discussion. Elliott, you monitor what goes on in the online world. Looking at what is going on in platforms like Weibo and WeChat, is there a feeling out there that this disease could have been perhaps better contained had authorities acted earlier or been a little more transparent with the public earlier?
Yeah, I think that definitely seems to be the consensus. I don't know if everyone has that point of view, but I think that I've never seen the Chinese public or internet space like this, particularly when I looked at my WeChat feed last night. Every single post was about this doctor. I've never seen anything like that in my decade or so of using the platform. It's really a very strong response, and I think with a lot of folks, they're really upset. They're cramped up inside. They're not able to go outside. They're not able to live their lives.
What is driving
so what
that unprecedented level of interest, if not anger, then, Elliott?
Well, I think some of them are just inside for so they're looking at their phones. But I think also a lot of them do feel betrayed. That is absolutely
by who? Local authorities or the central government, or who do they?
I think different people will say different things. I think certainly the local authorities, but you can't blame the local authorities without also looking at the broader system. And I think that what we've been seeing over the past, most of the past decade, is increased clamping down in China's digital space and in China's information space. And it's been particularly repressive over the past year or two. And I think this has been a time for a lot of folks to, where it's just kind of reached this boiling point, and a lot of folks are venting their frustration because the public sphere has shrunk so much in China that it's like a boiling kettle that is just that has no release. And I think a lot of folks are taking this opportunity to really vent that right now.
Einar, from where you sit in Beijing, how significant is this online anger? Is it a very rare expression that Beijing should take very seriously?
Yeah, I think they should take it very seriously. I mean, China has been very good about the on-ground logistics, taking care of things, but they're not very good at PR. And contrary to my Hong Kong colleagues' thought about this, I do think you need to, during events like this, control the narrative in terms of making sure that you don't have fear, all of these panic driving people. You know, if you look at the internet, there's so many different conspiracy theories, false information being spread around. And this kind of thing is you do, as a government, have a responsibility to address that. In terms of the internet, I think there's a misconception here. I talk to people every day. I've lived here for 15 years. I get annoyed at having to use a VPN. But the vast majority of people, it doesn't even faze them. This is not an issue about the internet. This is an issue about expectations of government and a muddled message. And I would agree with my other colleague that sitting inside, poring over your phone, looking for new news, it can get very, very tedious. People have a lot of anger and fear, and it's natural for them to find some sort of lightning rod. But China, the Chinese government needs to pay attention to this and make sure that people know what's going on.
All right, go ahead, Elliott.
So I think that to some extent I agree there, but you have to look at the bigger picture here. So if we're saying, okay, what are China's internet regulators to do in each given moment, then yeah, like you can understand some of these clampdowns. This is a failure over decades, a failure to build up these institutions that can deal with problems like this. So every time that we have seen amazing independent media rise within China over the past few decades. And every time that it's come up, it's been squashed. So what remains is the state or rumors. So yeah, if you're a regulator or if you're one of these platforms, you're going to squash these rumors because people don't know the difference between rumors and real news because they don't trust the state, and then everything else is rumors. Like you see, for example, like Caixin, which is one of China's most respected independent media outlets, has been doing great reporting on the virus because they're one of the only ones that's allowed to exist in China. Like what China is they're a bulked up, like super strong security state with skinny legs being their civil society. And this is the core issue. They need to have strong, independent institutions.
All right,
that's the issue here.
Hang on, Joseph. I'll give you a second to come in. Let me give Einar a brief 30 seconds comeback on that.
I think your rant speaks for itself. You have made up. Yeah, I think you've made up your mind on how this is, and I can understand from a Western perspective, from a democracy. You know, the press plays an absolute vital role. It's the fourth estate. It keeps power on level. If you'd let me finish, please. Thank you. In any event, so what you have to understand is that there are, in fact, different systems, that it's not a cookie-cutter universe where exactly one shape fits all. China has been successful. The government has, according to the WHO, performed admirably. They've set the gold standard for dealing with this. I don't know that you're trying to interject this idea that the press would somehow have cured this or prevented this outbreak is valid.
No, it's about not. It's not about reacting. It's proactive.
Let's give Joseph a chance to weigh in on this. Go ahead, Joseph, in Hong Kong.
See, the Chinese authorities did try to introduce a device called the Green Dam to monitor every new computer a few years ago. That didn't work out. But then in the past 1 or 2 years, the Chinese authorities are gradually introducing what they call a social credit system, which is actually a monitoring system informing the authorities how politically correct every individual is. And it is made clear, very clear, that criticisms or undue criticisms of the Chinese authorities over the internet will cause you a reduction of your points, of your ratings in this social credit system. And if your points or rating is very low, you can't even afford to buy a high-speed railway ticket or an air ticket. So this monitoring system is there. And we all know that the perfect way of killing rumors, of destroying rumors, is to inform the public promptly, in detail, and accurately to build that trust of the people in the authorities. silencing the public will not help to create trust.
Let me ask
will
this
not
question
help
to you, though,
inform
Joseph.
the public in a crisis
Do
situation.
you think that this crisis perhaps is going to push authorities towards more transparency and openness? Already we're hearing that Beijing has introduced, for example, a whistleblower hotline in the WeChat service.
But at the same time, the Central Propaganda Department of the party has just announced that it will send 300 journalists to Wuhan to inform the public. And I think most Chinese people, as reflected in internet, are quite cynical about this. And they say it is propaganda, it's not informing the public. And as we know, the medical facilities in Wuhan is far inadequate. It cannot deal with the number of recognized cases, even according to the statistics of the government. The new hospital just built has 1,000 hospital beds, but the recognized cases of the virus, or the coronavirus, numbers at least 25, 26,000 in the city. So the facilities are far from adequate.
Okay, let me jump in here. Let me bring Elliott back into the chat, and let's ask this question, Elliott. What does this whole issue reveal about to what extent private chat groups are really private on some of the apps like WeChat and Weibo? If ultimately the reason that Dr. Li went to the police, shall we put it that way, was because of a message he'd put out in one of these private groups.
Right. Yeah, well, I don't know anyone in China who assumes that their group chats are private. Yet it's different than Weibo, which is a Twitter. Weibo is like Twitter, where there is a virality that can happen. But with WeChat, if you have something within a group, it might go from group to group with people sharing it, but it doesn't have the same kind of viral effect that Twitter does. But yeah, I think that there's definitely concern about what you share in a WeChat group. And what happens is that if the person who is the administrator of the group is the one who is held accountable. So if you are administering a group, the onus is on you and the incentive is there to be very careful about what people are posting within that group. And what that does is it creates a silencing effect where if anything is possibly risky, they shut it down. And the ripple effects of this is, I think, this kind of thing. It's not the only effect, but I think this is one ripple effect of that.
Einar, do you think that this whole issue is going to force the Chinese authorities to look at this in a different way, and how they manage information, even if, as you said, there is a concern to make sure that rumors don't go rampant? Do you think a lesson is going to be taken back that this is not the way that information from doctors can be handled in the future?
Well, quite frankly, if you look at the WHO guidelines on communications that were developed post-Ebola, you understand that they say that everything should be synchronized in order to make sure that the government is, in fact, or whoever is leading this, has the credibility that's necessary to guide the public. Now, today we live in a world of social media. I mean, there's concerns about WeChat and Facebook and how they are being used to manipulate the public in elections and things like that. There's all sorts of very weird rumors that are constantly circulating. Then you have an event like this where it all gets focused. I think almost all governments are going to have to take these very seriously and make sure that they do it. I do agree with my colleague when he says that the best way to make sure that you have a credible story is to be out in front of it. I think during 9/11, Giuliani, who has since then not made himself the best, at that point, he did a tremendously good job of making sure people understood that they cared, that the information was transparent. I think China is trying to do that, but they're not good at this PR game. In terms of the future, I don't know. I mean, China is moving towards a sovereign internet, as is most of the world. The abuses, as he calls them, my colleague calls them, in China, are actually mirrored almost everywhere in the world. In the United States, we saw from the Snowden leaks and things like this, that there's a lot of information that's being gathered surreptitiously, maybe against the law. So at this point, privacy is not what we want it to be. It is probably a horse that has left the barn, so closing the door is not going to do anything. But China has a very good story.
We're not talking
I
about
think they should be
here.
more confident about saying what it is.
Speech.
All right, go ahead, Elliott.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to equate those two, right? We're not talking about privacy here, we're talking about speech. And I also want to emphasize here, I don't necessarily want to be critical of the government's response here. Where I do have criticism, and I think where a lot of my Chinese friends as well have criticism, is the system that allows this to happen, that puts security above all else, right, or stability above all else. And this kind of paranoid attitude that regulators have, that local officials have, and that that these platforms have as well, that just really stifles information and doesn't allow a healthy information ecosystem to grow. Right? This is not something that can happen in the short term. This is something that needs to be built up over the long term. This needs to be a long-term goal of the party, and it isn't.
All right, go ahead, Joseph.
This is not an issue of PR or public
If you believe that, then you should believe
it is a
that
matter
Donald
of
Trump
value.
is also
Hang on a minute, I'll give you a chance. I'll give you a chance in a second. Guys, let's just give Joseph a chance to finish the thought, then I'll come back to you guys, especially Einar.
Image and the power of the regime above the basic rights of the people. And that is what makes the people angry. Because now people in Wuhan and many people in cities like Hangzhou and so on.
But Joseph, to Mr. Einer's point, allow me to jump in here and present the alternative perspective. That China is a very big country, and the transition to democracy needs to be managed. It can't be sudden, or it would be chaotic. Is often the line that we hear from Beijing. Is there any, is there a point to that thinking that the transition to perhaps a fully democratic and open system must be managed in a way that doesn't cause chaos through mass fear? What would you say to that, Joseph?
Well, people now see that, in fact, the atmosphere has been tightening, not more relaxing. And I think all observers of China have been pointing to the fact that since roughly the year 2008, the year of the Olympics, the year of the riots in Tibet, and following the riots in Xinjiang in 2009, things have been tightening. Again, we look at the internet. Various public opinion leaders on the internet have been prosecuted, and they have been silenced. And there are less discussions over the internet.
All right, we've got 1 minute left, so I want to give the final a chance to Einar to come back in on some of those comments. Go ahead, Einar, but briefly.
I think there are different points of view on this, but the important thing is that China needs to develop a system where it can inform its people and internationally. I think they've done well in some aspects, but not the PR. I hope that everybody can see each other's points and that we can look at the main issue here, which is the virus.
We're going to have to wrap it up there. Let's thank our guests, Joseph, Einar, and Elliott. And thank you for watching. You can see the show again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, you can head over to our Facebook page. You'll find the address there, facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle, of course, is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Sami Zeidan, and the whole team here, for now, it's goodbye.